I am independent journalist Georgia Fort, and there's been some new footage that has released from the Department of Justice surrounding the January 6th attack. And I think it's imperative to continuously examine the evidence from January 6th. And the reason being is because, as Ben said, there's two different justice systems. And so when you look at what happened on January 6th, the fact that 5 people were killed, including law enforcement, and that 521 arrests have been made, yet and still no one has been charged with homicide. No one has been charged with manslaughter. No one has been charged with murder. And so I can't help but ask myself, if that were a group of Black people, how many would be facing those types of charges? And so as this new evidence surfaces, as new video footage is circulating, and we're getting a clear picture of exactly what happened, I think it's becoming clearer and clearer the reason why we remain consistent in talking about these topics, because it just continues to reveal itself, example after example after example. And so what you're looking at is rare footage from that evening. We've seen a lot of footage from during the day, but this is footage from that evening where you had Trump supporters who are still very persistent in demolishing our democracy as we know it today. I want you guys to take a listen of just a few moments from that evening.
Here's the thing. I protected you. Stop backing up! Stop! Oh, now they're coming back, guys.
God bless America. I guess I gotta move.
What's going on?
Man, I don't know. I just got tased. Not tased, maced. I was looking for my wife, man, and now they're pushing us back. You gotta respect it. I love my blue line, but this is crazy. I'm coming from Colorado, and I don't even know what to think. Is this how you guys do it here?
This is DC, yeah.
This is not what I'm used to.
What are you used to as far as
I'm
policing?
from Colorado, and yes, we just flipped colors, but I've never been shoved. Yep, absolutely. I've never been shoved by the police. I got tear gas.
We're going to the mayor's house next. We're going to the mayor's house next. She ordered it. I have the address. You got me twice in my eyes. I can't see. I don't know which way's safe.
You're good.
I don't know which way's safe. Take me.
I got your thing.
Take me.
You got it, my friend?
You got me twice. Oh
And
my
so
God,
you can just see just pure chaos. There's a number of individuals who are out there, one yelling, "We're going to the mayor's house," another saying, "This is not what I'm used to. That's not what he's used to. That's not the way he's used to being treated by the police." And then another woman there who had been maced and who really just seemed kind of taken aback that she received that treatment. Ben, I know that you have followed what happened on January 6th very closely, and you followed the political responses to this attack as well. And I think some politicians were just so surprised, and it was really the first time we saw Republicans taking a step back and denouncing some of the rhetoric from Trump.
Yeah. So, this footage is really it's compelling in the sense that it shows that these Trump supporters really thought they deserved a different type of justice. They did not expect they expected to be able to attack the country and not be challenged. And so they're coming back. And I often wonder how many of these participants, these insurrectionists, these people who marched up the steps of the Capitol, I wonder how many of them actually understood what they were involved in, not to give them any type of cover, but you all were involved in an attack on the government, an attempt to overthrow the government. You weren't there for a Saturday afternoon picnic. That was treason. And so did you expect to be able to get away with treason and not have any response from the federal government. And considering Donald Trump was president at the time, we almost did not have a response from the federal government because these people were representative of the president himself.
Well, and we've seen so many headlines about the insurrection. But the thing I have not seen people really press against is you have 521 arrests,
Mhm.
but you have no homicide charges, no manslaughter charges, no murder charges. But we know that 5 people, including law enforcement, were killed. How is it that you have arrested 521 people? Here we are 6 months later, and no one is being held accountable for not just one murder, but 5
Yeah.
people killed, and
Yeah.
no one's being held responsible.
And that's the thing about this that really shows you the difference in the justice systems here. Because you said had this been a black centered event, every person there would be liable for every person that died. They would find a way to connect us to those deaths. Example, Brian Sicknick, Officer Brian Sicknick, he was a Capitol police officer who died after the events of January 6th. He's counted in that total number of 5, but he died afterwards. I believe it was of a stroke. And so now, as we're looking into this, the charges that you said, they were not charged. The men who attacked Brian Sicknick, the men who attacked him on that day, were not charged with anything that was connected to murder. They got charged with assault. And so had that been, I'm just 100% confident, had that been any other group of people, and not just a group of black people, I also want you to keep in mind, had this been a group of left-leaning white people, this government is tolerating something from these right-wing conservatives that it would not allow from any other group, especially black people.
Yeah, when I think about it, just days after, I actually went to DC for the inauguration, and we have some footage of all of the soldiers that were there. It was uh, a bit of it was sad. It was sad to
Mm.
see that for the first time in our history, an inauguration couldn't be this celebration. People weren't allowed to go on the lawn of the Capitol. People weren't allowed to go up close to the White House. Like there was so much security, so much military. It was devastating to see that. You could see all of these troops.
Mm.
All of these troops there just simply to protect us from us.
Mm. That's
And it's, but at the same time, we know that there has not been the same level of militarized response. Like we didn't even see that when the insurrectionists were there. There was, as you saw, yes, some tear gassing, some macing, but there was no rubber bullets being fired at these people.
Right. Right. And just hearing you contextualize it like that, I'm thinking back on your coverage during the Dante Wright protests, the protests on behalf of Dante Wright, and how in reaction to black people protesting on behalf of Black lives, you got shot with a rubber bullet. So many people, we saw this with George Floyd last year, the protests in response to George Floyd. We saw the full force of these city governments, state governments, and sometimes the National Guard. We saw the full force of this government come down when it came time to defend Black lives. But when it came down time to defend this democracy, they stood down.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. There was a CNN reporter who was arrested live on television. They were arresting everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. And here on the other side for the January 6th attack, I don't think they arrested anybody on that day. They waited until people flew home. They did all of their investigating. They pulled their evidence and all of that, and even still didn't bring forth the worst charges that could be brought forth. They kind of just slapped these people on the wrist. And the thing, let me be honest, I am not a woman who who lives in fear or scares easily. But what terrifies me is that when you start investigating the 521 people who have been arrested from January 6th, it's not just a group of people from Texas. I mean, these people are from all over our country. And the deeper you go in that list and the deeper you look at who these people are and what they do, then you start to understand that they're the ones who are infiltrating our schools and pushing back against critical race theory. They're the ones who are infiltrating our health systems. And then if you want to be real, then we start asking ourselves, why are so many Black women dying when they're giving birth? And that's a large accusation to make. But have you ever heard the saying that doctors are to Black women what police are to Black men? Yeah, it's a real thing. These are the people who are in charge of approving loans. And so it starts. You can start to connect the dots. We always talk about the pattern and connecting the dots, but when you look at 521 people, and that's just those who were arrested, we know that there were many, 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 many more people who are out there that have not been accounted for. But these people are living in our societies, living in our communities, working in different professions, and having a huge impact on racial outcomes in our nation.
Absolutely. Like these people run the full gambit, the full range of whiteness in this country, in terms of white privilege, in terms of white wealth, in terms of white working class, the full range. But the people that normally take the blame for this type of thing usually is like the white working class. No, you had lawyers out there. You had attorneys out there. You had people flying out there in their private jets. You had the elite, the whitest and the most conservative and the wealthiest elite of the elite involved in this attempt to overthrow the government because they did not get their way at the election booth. And so we really need to understand what we're up against is a very widely dispersed opposition to this democracy. And especially if you want to really get them riled up, see how they're responding to critical race theory, they are going to get even more belligerent if it seems as though this democracy is falling underneath the control of minorities, especially Black people.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe I heard reports that there were some individuals who worked in law enforcement out there that day as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You had people who were law enforcement, ex-military. You had the full, and so this is the thing that I think people should keep in mind. You mentioned the relationship between doctors and Black women, and you said you kind of mentioned it was kind of a bold statement, but I don't think it's that bold of a statement. I think it's just an accurate statement. This system from top to bottom has been built to the benefit of whiteness. And everything that Black people have gotten in this country to date has been with bloodshed and fighting and organizing and protesting and sitting in and people dying. And we really have to understand that the systems that are now charting to change, they're not going to change easily. These last vestiges of racism that are in this country, like it is in our healthcare system. It is in the disparate treatment of Black women in our healthcare system. It absolutely is in the fact that these people could get away with murder on January 6th, right? The justice, but yet we can't get away with protesting on behalf of Black lives. Like that's where the battle for justice is right now. And this is where I honestly think, Georgia, I think this is the burning house that Dr. King was really talking about, because he knew that they would let us sit at the same lunch counter with them. But would they actually allow Black people to get power in this country? Oh, now we're going to see the fangs come out even more.
And before we move on, my last question to you, Ben, on this is, did January 6th impact white America? For the folks who didn't go out there, who sat at home and they watched this all unfold, did January 6th impact them? Did it help them see the difference? Did it help them realize the two systems that we've been discussing? Really, it feels like for centuries.
I certainly hope so. Because really what we saw, you phrased it perfectly. You said those soldiers were out there protecting us from us, right? What we're really seeing with regards to January 6th. And I want to be sure I'm going to be speaking later on this week with the commentator and a researcher who is going to show you that January 6th is not just January 6th. January 6th is just a flashpoint in a pan-reactionary movement. And essentially that just means that this is global. This is global white supremacy unifying across the globe in order to resist changes in this order, in this global order. There are people fighting. I just would summarize it like this, Georgia. I think that white liberals and even some conservatives who look at January 6th and feel like you can admit that it was something bad and that we need to do something about it to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again. I need you to understand the context of January 6th. It is a global movement that we are going to see continued efforts from reactionaries in the United States as well as across the globe to resist changing this system to a more perfect union. They are absolutely against it, and we're going to see more of it.
Absolutely. And you can't just see January 6th. You can't just see an attack on the Capitol and think, oh, everybody's just kumbaya. They just went home and left that chapter in their past. No, they're organizing, they're communicating, they're planning, and they are in every single state of this country. And so I really encourage people to remain vigilant and please don't just turn your cheek and act like this never happened because until there is tangible solutions put in place, until this is really confronted head on, until the people who are responsible for taking the lives of 5 individuals that day are held responsible, we're going to continue to see these people show themselves. But I digress. So, coming up for those of you who follow me, I am headquartered in Minneapolis and have followed the Derek Chauvin trial very closely. I was one of just about a dozen reporters who was allowed to go into the courtroom for the trial. Now, the sentencing is coming up on Friday. And this will be another defining moment because this is the last chapter, primarily in terms of justice for George Floyd. And we have been doing some research to try to find out where is the judge going to land? Is he going to be lenient with Derek Chauvin because he was an officer? Is he going to really make an example of Derek Chauvin, especially given the fact that he listed 5 aggregating factors, the fact that children were present, the duration of time, that he had accomplices. And so what we're expecting, we know that the defense attorney has asked for probation. The defense attorney has asked for probation and has said that because Derek Chauvin does not have any prior offenses, he should be able to serve out his sentence that way. On the other hand, he could get up to 30 years potentially. But this judge, when you look at his history of sentencing other people with similar charges, although they weren't cops, he has handled about a dozen second-degree murder offenses, and the stiffest sentence he gave anyone for that was about 15 years. So we're anticipating probably close to 15. It may be more if he really does consider those 5 aggregating factors that he mentioned after Derek Chauvin was found guilty.
Georgia, this goes right back to everything that you were saying with regards to what's happening on January 6th. I'm sorry, the footage is compelling. Just seeing him sit there so calmly and so relaxed and so put together. You would never know that he was a barbarian who put his knee on the neck of a black man for 10 minutes and snuffed the life out of him, and so this is what America gets to do with whiteness. It sanitizes it, puts a suit and tie in it, and then it has a nerve to get up here and ask for probation. He's a person who showed no mercy is now asking the court for mercy because he has on a suit and tie. So this is the kind of thing that I seriously have a problem with in this country. And it is quite the example of the dual justice system, one for white men in particular, and the rest, white conservative men to be specific, and the rest for the rest of us.
Well, and it leaves me to think about the broader picture here because America in 2020 really had to, and into I would say somewhat of 2021, had to confront its racial tension. It really had to. Things were just kind of bubbling over with George Floyd being a tipping point, and then. Of course, what happened on January 6th. And so I feel like, the sentencing is symbolic of us kind of starting a new chapter, us leaving this in the past. But I can't help but feel unsettled and uneasy because as we go to move forward, what's really changed? And I know we've been asking this question a lot, right? And clearly, yes, Juneteenth is a national holiday. But are we just it feels like America is just we had this opportunity to look ourselves in the mirror and confront our deep rooted issues. And we had an opportunity to really address them for the first time, it feels like in a long time. Otherwise, it was just passive. It was, just if you look at the numbers, and it was so easy to gaslight Black Americans' experience.
Yeah.
But when George Floyd had to endure 9 minutes and 29 seconds of a knee on his neck, people could not deny that. And what we saw on January 6th, people could not deny that. So we can't deny it, but we're allowing it to get it's becoming so much of a memory. It's getting so far behind us that we're losing the urgency to really address and uproot this core issue that our nation has been plagued with since its inception.
Absolutely. No, absolutely 100%. As it gets further away in our memory, I just want to remind people that had that been Black people, we would have been slaughtered on the spot. You see, we can't even get together and protest on behalf of Black lives without getting tanks pulled on us. Did we see did we see any tank show up to defend the Capitol? But I've seen tanks in Ferguson. We've seen tanks in all these different cities. Kenosha, Wisconsin. We saw tanks in paramilitary groups. We had entire factions of paramilitary groups show up to respond to Black lives protesting on behalf of Black lives. But when it came time to defend this country, where were the tanks? And so the further away we get from January 6th, like you said, Georgia, we're going to see the more white folks in this country start to rewrite that history. And when I say white folks, I'm talking about white supremacy, whiteness, not all white folks, but we know who we're talking about. It is a system of white supremacy, and they are actively rewriting it as we speak because they know that they jumped the shark. They know they went one step too far and that they're starting to lose the good, meaning liberals that have been putting up with them and trying to have bipartisanship with them all this time. Listen, I could talk about this forever. The bottom line is don't let them forget, because had it been Black people, we would all be dead.
And I think for me, the aha is that this pandemic is coming to an end. We're almost in a post-pandemic world. Most people, Ben, they just want to get back to normal.
Yeah.
And the reality about America, Black America, white America, is that they could be confronted with this. They could have the entire murder of George Floyd captured on camera and sit back and not do anything about it. And the same thing with January 6th. We have all of this footage. DOJ is now releasing more footage from this attack on January 6th, and we can see it. And we can sit back and say, that's awful, that's wrong. But what are you going to do about it? Because most of America, Black, white, Indigenous, Asian, Hispanic, we're just sitting back at home and we're just shaking our head and saying that's too bad. But at some point, if we really want tangible change, we have to get up and we have to do something about it.
Absolutely.
But yes, Ben, you're right. We could go on and on, but we are on the clock. So for those of you who are watching, we appreciate you tuning in for On the Clock, and keep it here for more on the Benjamin Dixon Show.